Yo, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I'm going to go over the trades that we took today inside the Discord, as well as the plan going into tomorrow. So, obviously today, it was a major down day for the market, and I'm going to show you guys what we did. So, obviously, going into today, we knew the market was bearish. And how do we know this? Pretty much on the put side, you can see what this chart looked like going into today and the close. So, on the 30-minute here, 640 puts, the 30-minute chart tells us the trend in the market. So since the 10's above the 50 on the put side, we know that the market's bearish, and your focus is on the downside. So pretty much like I said yesterday, you'd be looking for a 0DT cross on the put side. I'm pretty sure it was a weird cross. I'm not going to lie, off of open. If we pull up the SPY chart really quickly. All right, so this is what the 0DT chart looked like right off of open. So it was a bit of a funky cross. I'm not going to lie. When we look here off of open, you can see we end up closing below the 50, and then it kind of recrossed with this big candle closure back above here at 945. And at that point, 1.4 to 1, I mean, the contracts are a little extended. If there was some sort of dip here on that 950 candle, that would have been the spot to add in. I think some people caught this in the Discord maybe, but I didn't take this trade. Just wasn't what I was looking for. But that was a trade you could have taken. I was more so focused on the options plays. I mean, you could have taken options on this, but I've been looking for more so the weekly charts crossing on individual stocks. But this is just an example of how you would have played it. So we got back above the 10, the 50, either this candle or the 945 candle. It really depends on what it looked like at that specific time, because sometimes, when you look in hindsight or like back in time, the estimates look a little different than what it did in real time. So, we did get back above the 50 right here. You probably could have entered there, and then, you got a big move going after the fact. So, that's pretty much how you'd have played today. So we did pull back to the 50 right here. If you would have taken a stab at this, you would have taken a little loss right there. Contracts are at 216 on the dip. They closed below at 196. That's a really small loss if you did take it. But other than that, for SPY, there's really nothing else to play. When it comes to individual stocks, I told you guys I was swinging TSM, and man, this was a banger play. You could see what happened. I mean, all we did yesterday was play his 30-minute cross, and we caught over 150% on TSM. This was an absolute banger of a move. 10 crossing the 50 yesterday. We entered somewhere on this candle, I believe, right here. Contracts were around like 230, 240. I grabbed September 12th, 205 puts, and those went like 150% at the peak. So TSM was a really good setup. I told you guys I was swinging. I'm not looking for those little 30% moves, because I was up 35% at the close yesterday. And that's not enough for me. You guys know 50 to 70% I'm looking for the first trim. I end up selling a good chunk at like 90-some% this morning. So yeah, I mean, can't really complain with that trade. I made a mistake today when it came to this other trade. It was APP. I don't even have the chart right here, but I'll pull it up. It was just a late entry. This is a terrible trade by me. Mistakes were made. Mistakes were made with this trade. Shouldn't have taken it. I thought we were going to continue with the trend on this trade, but it just didn't end up happening. So if we look here, APP, if we pull up this contract right here, so this was an absolute L for me. I mean, this was not a good trade at all. I entered all the way up in here on these contracts because, all right, so my reasoning behind this trade was that we're going to continue with this trend, because usually, there was no entry really right off of open. I mean, I wanted some sort of pullback, and this candle, ended up wicking down, and I got in on this candle, in that marked the dead top. Contracts were, I was up, I think, like 20% at one point, or like 17-18%, but you guys know I'm not selling for that type of move, and we ended up getting this big pullback. I stopped out for like 70%. It was a bigger loss, I'm not gonna lie. So this was a trade that I kind of forced. Didn't need to take this whatsoever. That was my fault. This is just not a good trade to take. It was, I was kind of chasing this move. Like I said, it was a mistake. Shouldn't have taken this trade, but that's why, thank God, we had TSM for today, because this was a terrible trade. TSM made up for 150%. That's why I let my winners run, and my losses usually aren't as big as this one, because I ended up holding this all the way into this 50 SMA right up in here. So we were down quite a bit. Unfortunately, that was just a bad trade by me. It happens to everyone. I'm going to take a bad trade here and then, but majority of the time we're catching a really significant move, and recently we've been doing really well. Obviously, this was an exception, not a good trade by me, and just a trade I should have taken. So that was a mistake by me. But Going into tomorrow, we have news before open, but we did close at a pretty critical spot here on the put side. So if we pull up the SPY puts, if we pull up the weeklies here, we closed at major pivot point. So we closed right at the 50 SMA on the put side. I don't even know what contracts. Okay, we actually picked the right ones right on the dot. So you can see what happened here. We pulled back to this 50. 50 SMAs are your best dip buys in the trend. So personally, I didn't buy this dip just because we do have news before open. So, I'm not really trying to take a gamble overnight of, what news is going to be like tomorrow. So when we're like this, best case scenario is just, see what news is like, see what the charts are, and then go from there. Because, I'm not really trying to take a loss because we have news in the morning, could easily, prevent that loss from happening. And so, in this case, the charts do look very bearish. Like if we didn't have any news tomorrow, I'd say this is a really good looking pivot point to grab some short, or, I'd expect some downside. You necessarily don't have to play this, but, you could just have that bearish bias and then wait for a 0DT cross on the put side tomorrow. But yeah, this chart right here is a very bearish looking chart. Again, we do have news, a little bit of a gamble going into tomorrow. So, charts really don't matter since we have unemployment in the morning, because if that, pumps the market, then obviously we're going to lose the 50, cross negative, and get a pump going. But based on this chart alone, very bearish chart. Look at the higher time frames. 1 hour is just crossing that 50 is still down a bit. 2 hour ended up rejecting. 4 hours all the way up here. But yeah, 30-minute chart is a pretty bearish looking chart. And when we go to the monthlies, again, like I said, this is going to take a couple days to kind of play out and, see where we're actually going to going into next week. Because when we look on the monthlies here, we are starting to break below this 50 SMA, but again, this could still wick back above like it did back in here. 50 SMA is still trending up a little bit, so there's still a possibility this did get back above the 50. If we get another candle closure or two below this 50 and we go negative, then it's very bearish looking. I'm not gonna lie. That would be very bearish. If the 10 SMA crosses below the 50 on the monthlies, I'd be concerned for the market, and we're probably going to see some downside. I went over this in yesterday's video. It's all about kind of how we close the next 2 days, I'd say, because I can't really make a judgment off of this chart yet. There's still a little bit of a gap. 50 still trending up, and I'd want to see that 50 curl down, 10 SMA cross below it, and then at that point, if that happens, that's very bearish looking. And yeah, so that's kind of my outlook on SPY. 30-minute chart's pretty bearish. We have news tomorrow, so it's kind of conflicting. I can't really, say, oh, we're, I'm going to take a trade going into tomorrow because of the 30-minute chart, because we do have unemployment. So going to have to see how we open up tomorrow and go from there. But if we are still bearish going into tomorrow, at the open, and we hold the 50 on the 30-minute, you're going to look for that 0-day cross on puts. That's going to give me your best opportunity tomorrow, and you're going to want to hammer it if we get it. And then if we pump tomorrow and the 30-minute chart goes negative, which means the 10 SMA crosses below the 50 and the 50 is curling down, and the 10, crosses below it, then your best trade will be a positive cross on the put or on the call side. So those are your trade opportunities tomorrow when it comes to SPY on the 0DT chart on the 5-minute. When it comes to individual stocks, this was just unfortunate today because I was eyeing up some really good shorts. Tesla was so good looking going into today, man, and we just couldn't get an entry on it. It just moved so fast off of open, and we couldn't take an entry because it just dumped right off of open. It gave no entry point for me. I was waiting for the first 30-minute candle to close to make sure we were going to cross, and obviously that that didn't end up playing out for me. But when we go here, this is the September contracts, my bad. If we go here on the September or the August contracts, this was such a good move, man. I'm a little heated today because we just dumped right off open. It was very unfortunate. You could see, look at this move. These contracts were obviously right off open. We got this dip, so I was waiting for it to cross, and I'm going to show you the screenshot I sent in the Discord. This is what it looked like when I'm okay, I might take a stab, but I wanted to see it cross on the 31st. So because sometimes we do wick back below it. Let me find the screenshot because this was such a good looking chart, man. I really wish we hammered this, but it is what it is. Not going to catch everything. This is what it looked like. I mean, at this point, I could have hammered it, but we still had 14 minutes left. I'm okay, maybe this will pull back a little bit and we could get a good entry, but obviously that wasn't the case, and this just ended up flying, and no entry on that. And then we had Amazon too, which again, same kind of thing happened. I was waiting for the first 30 minutes to close just so I could see the 50 SMA curl up, because right off of open it could be a little weird with the 50s where we get a wick on this 30-minute and the 50 actually curls down a little bit. So again, Amazon, I mean, you could have actually entered this probably still, but at that point, 223 contracts are at like $1 on the 50. Like, I'm not gonna chase that. And again, these were at like 150 when I saw the chart off of open, and you could see the move that these went. These went 150 to 480. So it was an unfortunate day. I'm not gonna lie, not my best day in the world. Thank God for TSM. Like I said, we caught like 150% on that. And then APP was a loser. Shouldn't have even taken that trade, and we missed out on Tesla and Amazon. But always another day in the market. That's the thing. Got to realize there's always another day, always another setup to catch. Apple is actually a decent looking short going into today, or like off of the open. I didn't take it, but it's definitely looking like a good setup for the downside if the market stays bearish, because you would have got an entry on this already. If we pull up Apple really quickly, you can see here on this 30-minute chart, it looks really good. I'm not going to lie. 10 crossing the 50. 50's up nice. I mean, it was so choppy today, though. It would not get a leg lower. And, I mean, you still would have been paid. If you got in on a little dip here, like 130 to like 190, that's not a bad move at all. You probably caught like 50%. This is a good-looking setup if we do stay bearish. If we open up slightly green tomorrow, maybe you could add this for a short, because SPY will probably bounce out the 50 if we did, stay bearish, obviously. But if we cross negative and, every chart's going negative on the 30-minute, then obviously you're not going to be taking this trade. But Apple's not a bad-looking short. I wouldn't expect anything too crazy from Apple, just because if we look on the monthlies here, we are sitting right around this 50, which is a pretty big pivot point. 50 is like curling down a tiny bit. It's pretty level, but I'd expect probably that 30-minute cross to push us lower into this 50 and maybe bottom out from there. But yeah, it's pretty much what we did today. Plan going into tomorrow, and yeah, hope you guys enjoyed. Drop a sub. I'm out. Peace.